Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, Danielle Bezalel. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. If you love and support the work that we do, join my crew on Patreon to win amazing prizes like our adorable merch, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, private sessions with yours truly, and incredible sex toys. Go to patreon.com/sexedwithdb to join my crew. Get discounts at all of my favorite brands at sexedwithdb.com. And follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. If you want to partner with us, email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you're doing well and that you've been enjoying these wonderful bonus episodes every Friday. I've really enjoyed making them. There's a dedicated group I see on the back end who's listening every week. So hello to you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you are having a great week so far and you're getting amped for the weekend ahead, especially with this really fun question that we have, which is squirting pee? We don't get this question a lot, so I really wanted to answer it, though, for the advanced folks out there who want to learn all about squirting. And I'll really be taking my monologue here today from this article that came out from FLO, the period company. And this article is written by an OBGYN named Dr. Samina Rahman. And the article is titled Squirting, all your questions answered. So I figured it'd be really great in order for us to really go through today. What is squirting? Why does it happen? Where does it come from? And the ultimate question, is it pee? Is it urine? Really, really good cues. So let's kind of go over some of these basic questions. First of all, what is squirting? If you're not really familiar with squirting, if you haven't seen it in pornography, which is where people usually see it, or if you haven't experienced it yourself before, squirting is a term that's really describing the release of a colorless, odorless fluid during sexual activity. And when we say the release, we really mean like the gush of fluid. If you have squirted, you probably have experienced this gush. And if you haven't experienced this gush, then maybe you haven't, or maybe you have and it just feels different for you. But that is typically what folks talk about when we talk about squirting. Now, how is this different than just, getting wet or, like getting aroused? So, like, what you might have experienced or your partner might have experienced, if you're a vulva owner, is that when this arousal happens for vulva owners, right? Like the heart rate quickens, there's blood flow to the vagina, and that increases. And this kind of blood flow and this heart rate kind of pushes fluid to the surface of the vaginal walls, which is known as getting wet, right? And so that is part of arousal. But as we mentioned, squirting is really this gushing sensation rather than just feeling wet or moist. And again, you'll likely know if you've squirted. Some people may squirt when they have an orgasm, while others don't actively need to be climaxing. But during a squirt sesh, someone could release 10 milliliters of liquid or more, which kind of is that sounds like a lot of liquid to me. But who really knows? I think it really depends on the person too. And again, squirting can happen before orgasm or even in the absence of an orgasm. So someone doesn't need to reach orgasm in order to squirt. And it's not tied to the type or the quality of the orgasm. So this ultimate question, right? Like, is squirting the same as pee? And so when we really look at the medical research into this and just medical research on pleasure in general for people with vulvas, it's quite limited. No surprise there. Very unfortunate. We're, I think, trying to change that by making female pleasure more normalized and people with vulvas pleasure more normalized. But there are a lot of myths around this, and there's a lot of misinformation. But what folks really are finding is that while squirt doesn't encompass only pee, it does have a little bit of pee in it. And so when we're really looking at like what exactly is squirt made out of, let's look to this study that looked at 7 people with vulvas before and after they'd squirted. So these participants' bladders were found to be full before they'd squirted and were empty afterwards. But the analysis of the squirting liquid found that it wasn't just pee, but something similar. In fact, researchers also found that the majority of women's fluid contained prostate specific antigens, which are PSAs, which is an enzyme that's produced in your Skene's gland. So, squirting fluid is largely made up of the following: water, high amounts of uric acid, urea, creatinine, creatinine, yep, and sodium. And so during another study, interestingly enough, so there are a couple studies, I guess, that have been done, but not too many. To understand squirting further, researchers came to a similar conclusion. They injected blue dye into the bladders of its female participants and found that in all cases, the fluid released during squirting was blue. So that suggested that it had originated from the bladder, but it was also found to contain PSAs, meaning that the liquid must have come from both the bladder and the Skene's gland. So essentially, if you want to learn more about what the Skene's gland is, go ahead and look up this article. But that should tell you that squirting is not just pee, but it does have urine in it. And that blue dye that, basically came out that was injected in the bladder indicates that there was some urine in squirt. How normal and common is it? This it's hard really to say. There hasn't been a clear consensus, but women who do squirt, it seems to be a common occurrence, or it could be a common occurrence. It's hard to really work this out. I think we're still doing research on how common it is and how many people squirt. But despite this, there are a lot of different reasons why you might release liquid during sex. And these reasons can include vaginal lubrication during arousal, female ejaculate, which is slightly different from squirting. So stick with us here. It says in the article, female ejaculate is also made in the Skene's gland. However, unlike squirting, female ejaculation is described more as a trickle, with about 1 milliliter of thick, milky liquid being secreted. So, pee, if you've already experienced some incontinence, you might have also experienced coital incontinence, and that can show up as leaking urine with penetration. Essentially, it's a little bit of pee during sex. It's not the same thing as squirting and squirt. So those are kinds of all the different ways that fluid might be released. And this is a really important point here. The lack of distinction between fluids released during sex in scientific studies may be why there's an unknown about how many people can actually squirt. But whatever the specific number, the main thing is understanding your own body. If that means squirting is a common part of sex for you, then all power to you. And if not, then that's okay. So how does this squirting even happen? Um, G-spot stimulation. So the G-spot, or the Grafenberg zone, didn't even know that that's what it was, is thought to be located on the inside of the upper wall of the vagina. So if you put 2 fingers up the vagina and do a come here motion, it should feel like a little bit like the roof of your mouth, and that is the G-spot area. And when you feel aroused, that swells and might feel a little bumpy. And essentially, again, yeah, G spot is also contested. There's kind of no proof. People just claim that the G spot is a thing because it's part of the back of the clitoris. So some people really think that you can reach orgasm from pressing on the G spot. Research is a little iffy in this, but essentially, the idea is that G-spot stimulation can cause squirt. And so how do you make yourself squirt? Really hard to to kind of give instructions on this. But the most common directions are, again, to insert those fingers, kind of do that come hither motion and move the fingers along the anterior vaginal wall, which is towards the front. But yeah, it's really kind of whatever works for you. The takeaway here is that there's a lot left to learn. If you couldn't tell about my using this article and doing my own research, I think even scientists are still kind of up in the air about squirting, and there's limited research that's available and therefore a lot of myths. But long story short, if you can do it, it's completely normal. It can be pleasurable for some, not necessarily like you may have seen in porn. Again, remember that porn stars and adult film stars are professionals in their field for a reason. And so take with that what you will. It may not be the end all be all of, an amazing sexual experience, but, just have fun with it if it's something that you're interested in doing. There's a lot of ways to learn more. I think Beducated has like a squirting course if you're interested in checking that out. But yeah, I hope you learned a little bit more about squirting today. Have a wonderful weekend. Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our co-producer and communications lead is Cathren Cohen. Our social media intern is Sarah Kelly. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thank you so much to our featured guests, partners, and our listeners. Want to advertise with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdbpodcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. See you next time.